Temp check. What kind of summer are we having this year? A family road trip summer? A beach bum summer? Or a wake me up when the sun sets summer? With Instacart, choose your own adventure and skip the shopping side quests. Where available, you can get ice cream delivered to your hotel, sunscreen to the pool, or cold brew to your bed. Well, door, in as fast as 30 minutes. Wherever you find yourself this summer, you can get the goods. Download Instacart for free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum $10 per order. Excludes restaurants. Additional terms and fees apply.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
In each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Elza Kephart. She is a filmmaker who owns her own production company, Midnight Kingdom Films, and is the co-writer and director of the horror comedy Slaxx, which is now playing on Shudder. Welcome to the show, Elza.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
We're so excited to talk to you because I saw this movie back in Fantasia last year, and it was probably one of my favorites of the fest, and I'm glad to see that it's on Shudder and people are able to actually see it now. So I'm really excited.
Great. Oh, I'm glad that it caught your eye at Fantasia.
Oh yeah. But before we do talk about that, let's go back to the very beginning. How did you get introduced to the horror genre?
Well, it's really just something I've always been interested in ever since I was a kid. It started with literature, where I started to read Agatha Christie. Which doesn't sound like the horror genre, but for like a 10-year-old, it's a good gateway into horror. I think I read all her books. I was a real nerd. I had like a list and I would cross them off when I read them. And then from then on, I graduated to like R.L. Stine and Christopher Pike and Anne Rice, that sort of stuff. So it was through literature. And then when I was about 10, I started to watch horror movies. Some of them I watched too young, as we'll discuss later. And then I would make my cousin, who was 5 years younger than me, watch a horror movie on Halloween. Not Halloween, that makes sense. On Christmas, after Christmas opening presents. That was a little ritual. So it was just always something I was really drawn to. And then there was the Fantasia Festival in Montreal. It started here. So I started going pretty much from the second year on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that was a real education. And then, I don't know, I think it was just something I was really naturally drawn to, like the dark and the macabre. And in film school, I wasn't like, I'm going to make horror films. But when I came back from film school, I knew I wanted to make a really low budget feature. And it's with Patricia Gomez-Latar, the co-writer of Slaxx, who just sort of happened to stumble upon an idea for a zombie movie. And then when we decided to write this together, and I started to do research about zombie films just to make sure I wasn't being redundant, then I sort of fell back into it. And I was like, right, this is what I love. I love horror films. This is what I'm going to make. And so, yeah, so it was always just there, I have to say.
That's amazing. So can you tell us a few of the horror favorites that you had growing up?
Ooh, growing up, well, I watched Alien, which is not the film that scared me as so much, but it did scare me but it didn't really like totally disturb me. So I thought that was really great. The fearless vampire hunters or killers I really liked. And then, I don't know, we watched like tons of bad things like Child's Play and Chucky.
I love them.
I took my cousin to see Gremlins 2, and his mom was really mad that I took him. It's not scary at all. I don't know. I would go to the video store, and then the clerks would sort of recognize me, and they would start suggesting stuff. So I started watching Dario Argento, and he's one of my favorites, I have to say.
Oh, okay. So you watched him as a kid?
Not as a kid, but as a teenager, I started watching.
Teenager.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Argento?
Oh, Deep Red.
Deep Red is so good.
Yeah. There's just something about it, like the architecture and the symbolism of it that I really latched onto. I love Italian cinema from that era.
So good. I don't understand how he does it. It's ridiculous. Like, and over again. I just watched a bunch of Giallo recently, like, because I don't know much about it, and it was so impressive. So it's very fresh in my brain.
Yeah, I love the richness of the colors and the visual style of late 60s, early 70s Italian cinema. There's something about it that I think I've tried. It's not like I tried to capture it in Slaxx, but I think it's sort of permeated Slaxx with its bright colors and like widescreen and long take.
Yeah. So I know that when we were getting this together, one of the movies that you had mentioned was a movie that we had already covered on the podcast. But are there, besides The Exorcist, are there other movies that really terrified you as a kid growing up?
I would say it was Alien. One night I was at a chalet with my parents and some family friends, and we decided to rent Alien and The Fearless Vampire Killers or Hunters. And I was really young. I was 10, and those two scared me a lot. I had to made my parents make a cross out of toothbrushes and put it by my bedside so I wouldn't be so scared.
I love that.
I love vampires, so I don't know why. And it's really not a scary movie. It's just at the end where where I think it's the girl who's sort of nestled against his neck, and she looks up and there's fangs. That's the part that really got me.
It's always that image, right? That one image that sort of does it for you. And
I mean, there's so many, Watch Her in the Woods, I have to say. It didn't scare me, but there was something about it that I was disturbed, but I couldn't find it again, so I couldn't talk about it. But Poltergeist was pretty scary. I used to watch that with my friends, at sleepovers, and you would wait for the part where the hand comes out of the TV and all scream. Ah!
Oh my God. Poltergeist is mine that terrified me as a kid. That movie, oof, it really got into my head.
Yeah.
But so what draws you to horror and genre as an adult? You kind of talked about that a little bit before about getting into horror, but what really brings you back to not only creating within the genre, but watching it as well?
I think it's because it's highly symbolic. The imagery and the tropes, and I'm really drawn to mythology. And so I think horror films are sort of modern mythology, modern fairy tales. So that's why I'm drawn to it. It's like it short circuits the conscious mind and the logical mind to get into the dark primal mind. And I guess I'm more of a short circuit kind of girl where I like to get to the heart of it. And there's something that it's dreamlike also. You can't quite put your finger on it. You're not sure why. It's more mysterious. I'm drawn to anything that's mysterious and metaphysical. So I would say that's why I like being drawn to an idea where I don't know why I'm drawn to it. And then the sort of imagery draws me. And then eventually I find out later, why the idea was drawing me. It's almost like a spiritual or a metaphysical quest where this thing is calling and I have to sort of follow it.
Okay.
And I don't know why that's with horror. I guess because it's not logical as much.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think it's almost like a metaphysical quest that I go on as an artist, even with Killer Pants. I know it.
I always think about how, as an adult, we sort of, I feel like horror fans are constantly chasing that childhood thrill that they got as a kid. Do horror movies scare you as an adult anymore?
It depends. They don't scare me. Like, yeah, sure, there'll be jump scares because how can you not scream when, you're watching something and something jumps out at you? But the things that scare me, I wouldn't say they scare me, but they really disturb me. Like, films that really disturb me are, actually, I just wrote an article about like a disturbing double feature, which was Ravenous and, Zodiac.
Oh.
No, because I find cannibalism and serial killers, which serial killer is a bit like the first step before cannibalism. It's like a human who hunts human prey. There's some taboo that really disturbs me about those two, especially serial killers. It's like a deranged, because it's true, and cannibalism has happened too. So those two really disturb me. And Michael Haneke movies really disturb me, even though he's not technically horror.
I'm laughing because I just started another podcast about disturbing horror, like disturbing cinema, not horror cinema. And our first few episodes are about Michael Haneke because he is like so upsetting and his films are just devastating to watch. Yeah. So yes. Oh my God.
So those are the most, to me, those have been the most disturbing films, like The White Ribbon, Funny Games, Caché, really.
Oh my God.
Above horror films, like the genre films, those are the most disturbing.
You mentioned Ravenous. I haven't seen that movie in so many years, but I remember loving that movie, seeing it in the theater. Man, what a wild film.
I know. I don't think it really got the recognition. I watched it on video when I was doing research for my first feature, Graveyard Live. I was like, oh, cannibals. Let me watch this. I don't know why. It really just struck a chord, and I had to stop halfway through. I was like, I'm so disturbed by this. It's like the Wendigo myth and the Western expansion, like all that melded together just really creeped me out. And Robert Carlyle's performance is just so
unhinged. It's so good.
He's a creepy man.
Yeah. So I definitely think it's worth revisiting. It's really stands the test of time, that one.
And that's a good pairing, that and Zodiac. Like that would be a good double feature for sure. What a wild, 5-hour trip there.
Disturbathon.
There you go.
Seriously. So Elza, moving into talking about your film, Slaxx, can you tell our listeners a little bit about the film and what it's about?
Sure. So Slaxx is first and foremost about killer pants. It's about a young woman who goes in for her first day of work at a clothing store, only to find that there's something drastically wrong going on behind the scenes, and just discover what the source of the evil, but it's not really what she thought it was, and just to decide whether or not she's gonna put her life at risk to do battle against it. So yeah, and there's Bollywood music and stuff, and
I loved there's a moment in the film where the pants starts to dance to Bollywood music, and I was so enraptured at that moment. That moment was like the moment that I was like, okay, this thing is firing on all cylinders. And I'm so glad that you included in the credits like the kind of behind the scene look at how you filmed that scene, because I just it's so good.
Well, I'm glad. I almost didn't, and then everyone just loved it so much. I was like, okay, because I don't really like revealing tricks, but everyone was just there was such a positive reaction when we left it in there that I thought, no, we're going to have to leave it in there. So I'm glad I did it.
Me too. It was so adorable. Like, I was like, oh, it really shows the kind of the character that goes into creating that moment. And the woman that was doing it was having such a fun time behind it. It was so good. I really loved it.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So for those who haven't seen the film, can you kind of talk about how you made those pants dance?
Sure. I mean, it's pretty old-fashioned practical effects. We had a puppeteer dressed in a green suit, manipulating a real pair of pants, and it was attached to her by I think it's tent poles, like those Eureka tent poles. And she's basically dancing, and the pants look like they're dancing along with her, but it's because she's activating the pants. So it's pretty simple. It's a simple practical effects, but it's quite effective.
It works really well.
It sure does. Can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration for this film and what made you want to tackle like the fake corporate wokeness and the misuse of foreign labor? Oh God, the like triggering seeing these people be like, we're like the taglines and like we are ethically sourced. Like, oh my God. So where did that inspiration come from?
I know that ever since I've been pretty young, like, I don't know, 10 or something, I've really been aware of how corporations and media manipulate how we think. And so that's always really been a part of my consciousness ever since I've been young. And I don't know, I've always read up on corporate malfeasance and the beauty product industry, the fashion industry, what have you. But Slaxx actually didn't come from my desire to do anything about it. It really came from a joke between Patricia Gomez and I, where we were teasing a friend of ours when we were on a road trip about words we hated. And one of the words my friend hated was Slaxx. So we would repeat it over and over to her, Slaxx, Slaxx, Slaxx. And it just ended up sounding like a villain. And so we started writing a script, but it was based in high school and it was really lame. And then we wrote another draft based on Patricia's retail experience. So she had retail experience. I didn't.
Okay, I was going to ask about that too.
Yeah. And then it still was missing the heart. And so when we decided to do our next rewrite, I started to do more in-depth research on really on corporate practices. And that's when I started to really see, I mean, I knew child labor was involved. It wasn't a surprise, but I saw videos of children and photos, and just seeing their faces really affected me. And I knew that in order for Slaxx to be more than like a one-note joke about killer pants, it had to have a heart. And I realized that heart was that Slaxx is, a young Indian girl. And then it really fell into place. I did a lot of research on the fast fashion, and a lot of the elements that came from research landed up in the film, like the influencer. I'd never heard of a fashion influencer before I did research.
Oh, yeah.
So
you're
appalled
lucky
that this existed. I was like, what? This is, no, the world is far worse than I ever thought.
Oh, yes. Oh,
people make
yes.
multiple $1 million a year on fashion influencing and makeup influencing. It is a big industry on YouTube.
I know. And it's always like, oh, I could do it. I can't. I'm not good at that. Like, I don't like being in front of the camera and like having to be on all the time like that. No, thank you. It sounds like my worst nightmare.
No, and then you end up, influencing. I don't know why people don't think it's grotesque that you're trying to make people buy stuff they don't need. And most of the time it's women who feel like shit because they don't have the right clothes, or they don't have the right makeup, or they don't have the right this. And and you think you can achieve that by buying the right thing, but that's totally wrong. Like, it's on how you... So it's pretty terrifying.
So did Patricia have any good retail horror stories? I know that you said you haven't worked in retail, but she probably had quite a few that she used for inspiration, potentially even including someone about Craig.
Oh,
the boss.
That Craig came from all her experiences with her manager. She would tell me about these manager characters, and I was like, oh my God, this seems like it's insane. So her experience with the managers, and she's more like the Shruti character who just doesn't give a shit. She dresses all in black. Mm-hmm. She doesn't care. So she filled it with her 2 years experience there. And I never worked in retail, but I worked as a receptionist. I was temping in college and right out of college. And there was a little bit, I saw that corporate bullshit when I was temping. And so that also sort of permeated my mind, and the corporate lingo, which I hated so much, but loved all that. I would take notes because I knew one day I would have a villain that was in the corporate world.
Well, know, the thing is that Craig, in this, because this is such a satire, he does sometimes feel like a caricature. But I'll tell you what, anyone who has worked in retail has had a boss like Craig, and it killed me, because I worked it was called Shopco, and it was like a department store, and I worked there, and let me tell you, I saw so many Craigs in that place, and the way he would talk was just triggering me back to my high school. It just, the kind of the small fish in the big pond that is desperate to eat his way up to the top echelons of like being a regional store manager or whatever. It really brought me back to that time.
So another reviewer said it gave them like PTSD to watch Slaxx because of their retail experience. But no, it's just all around us, that retail nonsense, and that corporate nonsense. So it wasn't hard for me to get, beyond Patricia's references. It wasn't hard for me to project myself into that character, and I really love writing villains, so he was really delicious to write.
Oh yeah,
he was great.
What I also like / hate is this idea of working at a place that makes you purchase your clothing from the place that you work.
Yeah.
Which is a real thing. This is absolutely real thing. Two of my friends did retail for a very long time, and they luckily worked at a place that didn't have to do that. But like, there are so many of these like high level boutique type clothing stores that require you to buy in season clothing. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about the fact that, you are employing people for minimum wage a lot of time or very close to it. And you're forcing them to buy such expensive clothes to work at this place. It's
disgusting. I mean, that's why Patricia, who's very sassy and who like, if obviously you've never met her, but you don't cross her. If you don't have if you're not very, let's just say, secure in your own self, you don't cross Patricia Gomez. So she would wear black, and she's like, no, I don't need to change clothes. Black is always in season. And they would just leave her alone. They wouldn't argue with her.
It makes me laugh that she is sort of the stand-in for Patricia, because even when I was working at Shopco, there was always that one person that was so assured of themselves that they could get away with like going a little bit against the grain and no one would ever question them. So I love that's why we really wanted to know if either of you had that retail experience, because there are nuggets from this that just feel so freaking authentic.
Yeah, it was Patricia's 2 years at a store that shall remain nameless. a big retail store, a big chain.
When I worked, I never worked in retail, but I worked as a bartender at like a corporate-y place that was just like very much like the corporate brand image of a restaurant, and you had to buy all of their like monogrammed clothes that were the most uncomfortable clothes, but you had to wear them. Like they had this ugly, okay, I'm complaining very quickly. They had the ugliest polo that you had to wear when you were the bartender outside. And it was like, I live on the East Coast of the US, so it's really humid in the summer. It was the thickest material and it was the most unflattering color, and you had to wear it in the summer, and it showed every little bit of sweat. And it was like, this is not what you want a bartender to look like. It was a bad scene, and the shirts were almost like $30 a piece. Ugh.
Whoa.
Anyway, just going back to those memories, very visceral reactions.
Well, we've all had those. I mean, I'd be surprised to hear of someone who hasn't had a horrible corporate experience. That's why I think in Slaxx, the corporation is really the real villain.
Oh yeah. By the end of the movie, I was like cheering on those pants.
Yes. Yes, that's the idea. Yes.
Exactly.
And I was so happy with the way you guys took the ending, because I was ready for a pants invasion. Just go out there and I love the way it ended.
Oh, great.
Okay. So, Elza, we have talked about Slaxx.
Yes.
What movie are we discussing with you today?
A movie that is so bad it's great, called Exorcist II, The Heretic.
Okay, so you've heard of The Exorcist, and a lot of you love Exorcist III, but we're going Exorcist II. So a teenage girl once possessed by a demon, our girl Reagan, played by Linda Blair, she finds that demon Pazuzu still lurks within her. Meanwhile, a priest investigates the death of her exorcist, played by Max von Sydow. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Except, boy, does so much more happen in this movie. So, Elza, how old were you when you saw this movie? How did you see it? Give us your horror story about this film, because I am so curious.
Well, I think I was 10 or 11, and I was in a friend's basement, and I don't know how we happened to fall on it. It wasn't something we were planning on watching. It literally appeared on television, And I don't know why, because I rewatched it recently. Well, I know exactly what scarred me. It was the scene where the demon is fighting for the psychiatrist's heart.
I was wondering. I was going to say, like, that part was really, like, intense and stressful. So I was wondering if you were going to bring that scene up.
It was that, and then it was the first scene with the locusts, and then I was so scared I turned it off. So I never actually watched the whole thing until I rewatched it recently, and I was like, oh my god, this is the worst movie ever! I can't believe I was so scared. And I was so scared, I told my mom, I want to see a psychologist because it scared me so much. Yes, I swear I was disturbed for I don't know how many weeks with that one shot. And she was like, no, okay, well, I guess we'll go, but how about you just like wait a little bit? It was just a horror movie. And I think the worst part was that I was watching it with a friend, and my friend made me, like, scared me more. She was trying to get me to be really scared, and so that scared me even more, even though we just watched about, I don't know, half an hour of it. And the funniest thing is her mother was a psychologist.
Oh.
And I was like, I think I need to see my friend's mom, because I was really disturbed.
You should have gone upstairs and be like, hey, do you have a synchronizer? Yeah. Like, can we talk about this?
But it was those two shots. And I can see why, as a young person, like, the scene with the heart and the, like, weird demon would be terrifying, but the rest is pretty bad. So yeah. I don't know what we can talk about.
So the scene in particular is the one where she's going through the synchronizer for the first time, and it's the priest has linked himself up to her, and we have photoimposed on the glass walls behind them a flashback to the Exorcist scene, and she is like caressing the heart while reaching out. Is that the scene that we're kind of talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
That was a weird scene to watch. The way it was filmed, in particular, with the superimposed image, and I actually kind of dug how she was in the flashback reaching out, but it also kind of affected the future and was like grabbing the heart. I actually really dug that kind of scene, to be perfectly honest. I think that was one of the more inventive uses in this movie.
Yeah, and it was scary, but it's one of the only scary moments in the film.
Yeah.
In my defense.
Yeah.
Or disturbing. It's not really scary, it's disturbing, like, to watch this, like, demon hand reach into this live pulsing heart, and like she's sort of fighting for this heart, and I don't know why, it just scared the bejesus out of me when I was a kid. When I was a kid.
So you saw like 30 minutes of this movie, including the giant locust, and
yes,
you guys just shut it off?
Yeah, I was too scared. My friend wanted she turned it back on, and she was like, let's watch more, being really evil. And I was like, no,
of course.
can't. And I think I ran upstairs, and I was like, no, I'm done. And I watched it. I probably would have been like, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. Why was I so scared to begin with?
And she wasn't scared? She was just laughing at you?
Yeah. Pretty evil friend, seeing as her mom was a psychologist, or maybe she was just like really well balanced and wasn't scared of horror films or something.
I also feel like when you watch a horror movie with friends, there's always like, at least this is my experience, like I'm always the one that is like obviously scared, and then my friends who don't want to seem scared, they make fun of it, but that's their way of not betraying the fact that they are a little bit terrified. That's my theory.
Could be.
I'm just trying to make myself feel better that I'm scared of everything. So, you know.
I should call that girl, like, whatever, 40, I'm not 50, like 30 years later, and be like, hi, do you remember that film? She probably won't.
I still think about it. I talked about it on a podcast.
Yeah. She'll be like, what are you talking about?
You mentioned that also that after you saw the film that you were wanting to go see a psychologist. Did it give you nightmares, or did you just like constantly think about it? Or
no, I don't think it gave me nightmares. I just kept seeing that image of the heart, the fighting against the heart, and it really, I don't know why, it really disturbed me. Maybe it's back to the cannibalism fear, that like I find cannibalism really goes beyond. Like it's for me, it's a real taboo that disturbs me so much. But so maybe it's a little bit relating to like seeing a human organ being sort of like manipulated by. But although, like, for example, I love Dead Alive, which has human organs being manipulated all the time.
Dead Alive. Oh, jeez.
But that's a very different kind of organ manipulation, I will say. Do you like body horror? Like, do you like body horror films?
No, not particularly.
Okay.
No, I like more supernatural, like vampires, and I like when the monster is the same thing as the hero, so where you can't really discern the monster. Like my first film was a zombie movie, and it's the main character is a nurse who gets bitten by a zombie and turns into a zombie, and we're with her as she's turning into a zombie and trying to figure out what's happening. So I think I really like, and I wrote Patricia and I have been writing a vampire show together. So I think I like being the villain, sort of being able to be the villain. That's what draws me a lot to writing horror.
Cool. So, okay, I want to bring up something with the synchronizer because it reminded me of it's reminded me of something I've used in therapy before. Oh. Not exactly the same, I swear. But
you didn't have a priest in the room, like, connecting his thoughts to yours?
No, I did not. I was also not possessed by a demon that I know of. I might have it repressed. I mean, who knows? But there's this technique in therapy called EMDR. I don't know if either of you've heard of it, but it's used like in trauma therapy where it is a flashing light and you stare at the flashing light, and it's not necessarily hypnotism, but it's like it puts you in a very like weird mind state, and then you talk about trauma, which is kind of similar to the synchronizer without that weird psychic connection. So I was watching it and I was like, this is, weirdly based on a psychological practice, but taken to a very weird extreme where it's like control the tone and we are now connected. That didn't happen to me, but I was actually rather impressed. And I don't even know if they knew that was based on EMDR, but I just wanted to give that little tidbit about that.
I did think that the synchronizing tone was pretty creepy. Like, boom. Yeah. There's something about that like when you're bringing someone down to your level, there was something eerie about that moment, and so that's maybe the other thing they got right.
Well, it's like weirdly intimate too. Like, you're looking at each other and you're getting into each other's heads, but in like this very ominous way with like the tones and the very like creepy voices, because Linda Blair is very good at creepy. Like, let's just say that I think she's good at creepy. And so that definitely felt like the tension was building. So like they did a really good job, I feel like, in certain scenes of having this like tension and fear, and then it just kind of falls apart later. But they tried.
They tried. And then when they go to Africa, i.e. the studio.
Oh my God. Africa.
Like, I was watching it with my boyfriend and one who's Moroccan, and he was like, is this supposed to be Africa? Like, he was just dying. He's like, what is this?
What is this?
Yeah. He was like, he's like, is this gonna get better? I'm like, I'm not sure. And then when they're like, the locusts are like, oh, we have those. He's like, yeah, those are bad. Okay. And then he's like, is this the scariest it is? Because we have locusts here.
Locust devouring children, like, who live in, like, it's just like this, such a stereotypical vision of what Western people think Africa is. Like, people in grass huts, and it's like dirt, and people that like obviously like they don't have any like education. It's like you couldn't have gotten any more stereotypical in this representation of Africa as a whole.
Never mind that it's a continent.
Yeah, exactly. Never mind that it's a huge continent with like many countries and cultures and people, but like, don't worry about it. It's fine. Exorcist II, the Heretic, understands Africa. Sorry. Y'all just Googled, not even Googled because it was not then. You like opened up a book and looked at a picture. I'm like, that's Africa. And then just like went from there.
Yeah, no, it was pretty egregious, I have to say. But he just had a good laugh. And then he was like, I'm bored. I want to watch. We watched like old James Bond together, and he's like, "Can we just watch James Bond? This is boring."
Look, I get it.
Yeah. You know, what surprised me about the whole Africa part was that all of a sudden we are shoehorning in a white savior narrative in the middle of this film, because we have this priest that is living with the African people and he's taking pictures and then he's performing an exorcist on this young boy. I'm like, wow, we're really digging into that kind of white savior narrative here.
It's not even like worth mentioning. It's so bad.
I don't understand how it got there.
I mean, either. It just sort of did.
Well,
I was like, did I miss something here? Like, I understand that she flew through the eyes of a locust.
Yes. The Pazuzu says, "Come, Reagan, we're going flying," and then they take off as a giant bat-sized locust across the fields and plains of Africa. And I'm like, what is happening?
It's like you almost want to respect it for being so damn campy. And like that's what makes it even more campy, because it doesn't know that it's camp. Because Terry, you texted me about the ending and you were like, this is camp. And like it is just ridiculous.
With a bed.
Yeah. Like locust POV shots. Like, give me more bug POV movies. Like in this and Phenomena, where you see through the eyes of the fly. Like what are the ladybugs? Sorry, the ladybugs.
Ladybugs, yeah. And you could tell with the director is John Borman, and you know he has just come off of directing two completely different films with Deliverance and then Zardoz.
Oh,
okay.
No, wait. I love Zardoz. Super bad.
It's so bad. Like, he is very good at the so bad it's good. But then also Deliverance was just like a very important, like, well, important, that's a strong word. A very, like, influential / like, people talk about it a lot, horror movies. So, wow, he really runs the gamut here on movies and tones.
And he did Excalibur, which...
Yes, he did.
I also sort of love, but...
I love Excalibur.
I mean, it's totally over. They spend the whole movie shouting. I don't know if you noticed. They're like always shouting at each other.
It's probably been 20 years since I've seen Excalibur. It was one that I would watch as a kid. I loved fantasy movies, and so I remember watching that one a whole lot as a kid, even though I probably shouldn't have. But yeah, his career is wild. But you can see that like he's making this movie, and he thinks that he's making such like a high class art statement, and yet I think that's why it becomes so campy in parts, because it's like, oh, you really think that you are somehow going above and beyond what was happening in The Exorcist, but it's really ridiculous.
It's the script is terrible. Well, there's no real script. I mean, it's like a bunch of random scenes where you're like, wait, what's the story? I'm not sure what the... And then the terrible sets. But I have to say, look, even though this one is a terrible John Borman one, I have to say I have a soft spot for Zardoz because it's so outrageous.
I need to watch Zardoz. I've never seen
The
it.
gun is good. The penis is evil. And it's just a floating stone head just regurgitating.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, no.
The gun is good. The penis is evil. That's actually a film. Yes.
What?
Yeah, and then there's like a giant floating stone head that just like spits out guns onto the ground.
Oh,
it's because a friend of mine who loves fantasy was like, "You've never seen Zardoz?" I was like, "No, I hear it's the worst movie ever." He's like, "Oh, it's so bad, it's awesome." And I was like, "Okay." I put it in, and I literally could not believe what I was watching. I'm like, am I hallucinating? This is amazing.
And like Sean Connery has long black hair, and like you saw the outfit, Terry, of like the little red diaper with the boots and like the suspender.
That is the only thing I know about Zardoz is Sean Connery rocking this. I don't even know what to call it.
The lederhosen?
Yes.
Futuristic lederhosen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that image I think kind of sums up this movie too. I mean, why we got this film.
Oh.
And like, you know what? What a career path that man has had. Just looking at those.
Yeah.
But if you're listening out there and you've never seen Zardoz, do yourself a favor. Go rent it right now.
I'm going to watch it, I think,
It's
this
true.
week at some point.
I have to say,
should watch
Charlotte
Zardoz.
Rampling, because I love Charlotte Rampling, she sort of rocks. She's the only one where you watch it and you're like, oh, okay, you're actually selling me that this is true. Like, this is really happening. And I'm taking you seriously.
Isn't it also really long?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like it used to be... I don't drink much anymore, but when I overindulged back in the day, I would be like, I'm going to watch Zardoz today. Yes. Because it was so long. I would just like what's the word, hangoverly, like watch Zardoz and fall asleep and walk back up and be like, it's still on.
Yeah, it's almost 2 hours long. Wow.
It feels longer.
That's what I've heard. I feel like it feels longer because it's just like keeps going and keeps going. Anyway, back to the other movie we're talking about.
So there's a couple of kind of, some kind of cool set pieces and some set pieces that I think are just really bizarre. When Regan paints a picture of the priest, Lamont, and there's flames beside him, and he is looking, I mean, it looks like he's kind of given me David Bowie realness with that kind of different colored eyes. And like, I don't know, there's that happening. And then he decides out of a whim by looking at this that there's a fire someplace in the building. Yeah. And so they go to the basement and there's a box that's on fire. And instead of grabbing the fire extinguisher that they just walked by to go to this box, he grabs a wooden crutch and starts smacking it. Oh. I was really confused about that. And then she says, I need to go call the fire department, runs back past the fire extinguisher to go call the fire department, and then finally grabs it while the flames have like spread into like the clothing and the boxes and everything. What? You two are not the smartest cookies. And you're a psychiatrist.
I think to me, having like written stuff, I think it was one of those things where they were like, oh, The Exorcist, it did so well, we have to do a remake. Or a sequel, and then they try to like cram something together, and no one was really looking at the script. They just wanted to put it in production, and so there's all these loopholes that no one really paid attention to, and the screenwriter was probably like, "Oh, this is fine, like no problem," or maybe they had something else planned. And then they were like, oh, wait, but he's running by the fire extinguisher. Why shouldn't he grab it? And they're like, no one's going to notice that he's running past the fire extinguisher. Don't worry about it.
Grab the crutch.
I could just hear the production meetings going on as they're frantically trying to like get this film in the can. That's sort of what it feels like. It doesn't feel really thought through.
No. And Linda Blair has said in interviews after this movie that the script that she signed on to is not the script that they ended up filming with. So I think you're
really?
right. I think the movie got rewritten a whole bunch of times throughout production, and that's probably why it's kind of a beautiful mess.
It's certainly a surprising. It's a surprising mess of nonsense. I like when she tap dances. Like what am I watching here?
That leads me to what I wanted to talk about with Linda Blair, because we see her in the first movie as Regan, a innocent young child, and then in this movie she like skyrockets into a very sexualized teenager. Like when she's first tap dancing, she wears that crop top or whatever that is, and she's tap dancing, and then for the rest of the movie she's like very seductive, and she's in high school, right? Like she's still a teenager.
It's never clear. I feel
it's very strange.
It's supposedly set 4 years after The Exorcist, so I think she's supposed to be 16.
Okay, I mean they just sexualized her character in a way that was like a lot.
Because I felt like I was really surprised. I was like, wait a minute, what am I watching? Like the clothing it's very tight on her, the red lipstick, the hair, the Farrah Fawcett hair, like and it's like, is she supposed to like get it on with the priest? Is there something about like there's a weird undercurrent?
Well, there's that weird sequence at the end where it's, of course, at the end of the movie when they finally go to DC and they go to her old house in DC and they like go to the place of the initial possession. There is Pazuzu as Regan in the bed and transforms into like a sexy Regan, and the priest jumps on top of her and then she whispers, "Kill her," into his ear.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I guess that's what it was leading up to.
Yes, like this weird like sexual tension between a 16-year-old and a priest.
Well, I wouldn't have minded that so much, but she feels really young, like as an actress.
Yeah. That was it for me. It was like she's so young,
and it feels like it's like an appendage. It doesn't feel like they've been weaving in this like weird subtext.
Yeah.
And apparently, the way they had it written, it was supposed to be a bit more explicit, and both Linda Blair and who's the guy's name? The guy that played the priest, Richard Burton. They both said no, because she was 18, I think, at the time, and he was in his 50s. He's like, nope, this isn't something I want to film, and so they toned it down for this. So what we're seeing is the kind of toned down, seductive sequence on the bed, which I just don't know what to say about. I don't know what to say about the ending. The ending is such a. I think it perfectly encapsulates the rest of the film, because there are moments of some like really cool cinematography with it, where you have first of all, you have the longest and the most boring car chase, bus chase, plane chase sequence between the two women who are trying to get back to the Washington with the priest and Regan.
Oh my God, yes.
And they're crisscrossed with each other, where they're taking the train, so they're taking a plane, and then they're taking a bus in Washington, while the women are taking taxis, and they're constantly having to stop because the one woman is a doctor, and there's so many people getting injured apparently on the street that they have to keep stopping to help them.
It's phenomenal, though. It's a demonic chase sequence, because like the plane keeps falling up and down, and just things keep like, oh, there's traffic. There was an accident, like right in the middle, like right in front of them, and of course she can't, like you said, Terry. She has to go help him because she's a doctor, and then the taxi, like everything starts breaking. It's beautiful. It's amazing
that no studio exec was like, this makes no sense. Why don't we just cut to when they get there? Because the film is really long. It's like 2 hours.
It's so long.
And this chase sequence is basically the entire third act. Like, it just keeps going. And I was trying to take note, and the cinematography in this I thought was kind of cool, because the way it would crisscross between the two different paths, and it would like build to some kind of climax where finally he's opening the door and he's being assaulted by locusts while something breaks the windshield of the taxi, and the taxi driver punches through the window in order to see before crashing into it ends on such an exciting note, but like it took so long to get there.
And it was totally unnecessarily and ridiculous.
I forgot that he punched through the windshield, which is definitely what you do when you can't see. You just you put your fist through the glass. Yep.
And all I kept thinking was, the other character, the woman, I forget her name, not the psychologist, the like caretaker, she dies, like she's a totally useless character, but I was thinking maybe the woman who played Linda Blair's mom didn't want to come back. And so they're like,
she didn't.
We have to figure out a way to explain that why her mom's not there.
From what I've gathered from doing some digging about this, they originally wanted to have Regan's mom in this, but she was like, no, the script is terrible.
Oh.
And
good on her.
They had a male psychiatrist, and they ended up making it a woman, and then hiring Louise Fletcher because she looked kind of like her mom, was the rationale behind it. And so she basically becomes the sort of surrogate mom, which I think this movie definitely leans into, because she seems more interested in the well-being of Regan than her aunt Sharon, played by Kitty Wynn, is. Like, she has no interest in her kid. This kid, it seems like
it just seems like she's in like a cult movie or something. It seems like she's in a totally different film.
Yeah, well, and there's this moment when Sharon and Dr. Tuscan are trying to figure out where Regan is, and she's like, oh, she's at Penn Station. Sharon says, that little bitch. Like
I remember that.
I'm like, wow, this is your niece that you're saying this about.
There's no rhyme or reason in The Exorcist II, so really.
No. Well, there's no rhyme or reason, because then at the end, Sharon gets out of the car and pulls like a Damien from the Omen moment and like turns around slowly and lights herself on fire.
Yeah, that made Oh, that I was like, why is she even in this film to begin with? She made no sense.
It's like just escalating and escalate. Like it's like nothing really happens.
No.
Well, there's stuff happens, but then like for the last 20 minutes, it's like we're just gonna escalate to all the things we wanted to do, but then just pack it into the end and like let's just see what happens. We'll have explosions and houses falling apart and locusts. Let's just see how it all comes together. Not well.
I mean, this must have cost a lot because just the scene of the bed shaking and the house falling apart. I mean, that's some expensive builds right there.
I really liked the way this movie ended with that. It was very exciting, and it was like, oh, finally there's something really exciting happening on screen. It's not two people staring at a strobe light for 3 minutes at a time. But no, you're right. That whole sequence looked really expensive, and it looked really dangerous.
That's probably where all their budget went. That's why they only did the staring at the strobe lights. Like, we're just going to do a really big ending. And then the rest of it will be people staring at lights and into each other's eyes and pantomiming what they're seeing, but not actually showing it until they go to Africa.
Yeah, the Africa sequence must have cost a lot to build that whole town. And that the cliff, that rock cliff, the Ethiopian monastery rock cliff.
The rock cliff that seems impossible to climb up. And we spend so much time both with Max von Sydow's character in the flashback and then also with Lamont reclimbing it. Why?
It's bad screenwriting. And maybe they're like, well, we built the fucking thing. Like, we have to use it. All right, let's show him climbing it, I guess. What else can we do? We built it. It was before the studio era where before the big studio film started where they were like, oh, we built this huge set. We just cut the scene. Okay. Like, I've worked on films like that where they built a humongous set and they realized they were just not going to use it. So they felt obliged to use it in a way, even though it turned out to be terrible. And they're like, no, we shot it. It has to be in the movie.
The set design in particular in this film also really confused me, confounded me, and also like I was like really into in some points. Okay, so there's a psychiatry office that she works in where she is like in the center of a hive mind almost, but everything is glass. Mm-hmm. So everything is just, there's no privacy, and it's just her in the center with doors that sort of open and shut based on movement. We're on the Starship Enterprise, and this is like what the psychiatrist office looks like. I was so astounded that this was the design. I mean, it looked kind of cool, but
it made no sense logically, but I agree with you that it looked really cool, and especially that the glass, that the lights would turn on and off and would isolate the pods. But it makes no sense that a psychiatrist who's supposed to be like in an intimate place is in the middle of this glass.
It felt like the kids were like in little glass cages. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where like she was watching all of these kids that were in some way considered like, a lot of them had like, you know, maybe like mental disabilities. Like I think there was someone with Down syndrome. There was the little girl with autism that Reagan cured in 2 seconds. And it was just very weird to see like, not cages, but it felt like weird like separations of kids who needed her, like the psychiatrist assistance in some way, like all kind of on display for her in the center. It was very weird. And her whole like Reagan being involved, I think with those those children was also very strange. Because, you know, they opened up with a psychiatrist giving the one young girl a hearing test, right? And like helping her hear again. And I was like, wait, what? I was like very confused as to how that was supposed to lead into Reagan arriving at her office.
Well, I feel like there's a germ of an idea, like if you're, you know, a woman or a young woman who's been possessed by a demon, and then it's opened up some sort of brain frequency, and so you're able to like tap into something and heal, and then, but they didn't explore that idea, because I thought that was sort of interesting. That could have been interesting, and then somehow there's a priest in there. I don't know, but
they sort of drop these little nuggets in there. I mean, because the movie opens up in I think it's Mexico, and there's the one woman who says, you know, I'm a healer. Why am I being attacked by this? And then you have the place in Africa where you have a kid who's also a healer, and he's being assaulted by a Pazuzu. And now you have Reagan, who is also, you know, I guess in this movie a healer as well, and then she is also being attacked by Pazuzu. So I think there was probably an intention at some point to maybe have a through line through these, but I don't feel that was connected. I think it was just sort of like, there's an idea, there's a nugget of an idea, go.
No, it didn't. It needed several rewrites. I mean, even that I'm not sure would have solved the problem, but it might have helped.
Some of the lines, though, really tickled me. So you have when Reagan first talks to the girl with autism, and Reagan's like, "What's the matter with you?" And she says, "I'm autistic. What's the matter with you?" She's like, "I was possessed by a demon." "Oh, it's okay. He's gone." It reminded me of like the Monty Python skit of I got better, It reminded me of that, like, I was possessed at one time, but I'm fine now.
And there's this like weird association here with demonic possession and mental illness or like mental like disability. There was, again, nuggets of ideas that just blew away in the wind. Like there was something to be said, I think, about, and maybe they didn't actually think about this because mental illness was not necessarily like the most well discussed topic back then, but still like equating kids with autism with a girl who was possessed by a demon. Like there's a very interesting tension going on there between like mental illness and demonic possession.
Well, it would have been interesting because I'm really interested in mental illness and how it's perceived in different countries, and some traditions do equate mental illness with demonic possession, which isn't fair, obviously. I'm not saying, but it would have been interesting to weave that in. It would have been interesting to explore why certain cultures believe that, and then others call it mental. I mean, they do a little bit with a psychologist, but they don't really, they don't explore it. She just sort of states it. But I think it might have been interesting to actually use that as a jumping off point.
Well, and like could have been worked well in with like the scenes in Africa, but then of course there it's just the spectacle of the whole thing, and it isn't just like this kid might be having seizures. It's just like, no, he is possessed and like he is going to talk in the voice of a demon. It's like there was something there, but nope, it was all just kind of spectacle for the audience.
We're really selling it for your listeners. They're gonna watch Exorcist II. Like,
no,
guys,
listen.
When
I tweeted out that I was finally watching this movie because I had never seen it before, so this was my first watch. And
me too.
I had thrown out there on Twitter, is like, hey, we're gonna watch this movie. Is like, does anyone like it? This movie has been like universally reviled in a lot of ways. I remember reading reports of people. Again, these are all third person, so it's probably exaggerated, but there were reports of people in the first viewing of this movie in the theater throwing things at the screen and tearing the chairs out of the auditorium, just like super upset with what they were given. William Friedkin, there's a clip on YouTube of him, and I don't know if he's at like a convention or something, and they ask him if he had seen any of the sequels, and he talks about how he was at the Warner Brothers studio and they were color correcting this film, and they asked if he wanted to see it, and he watched 2 minutes, and he was talking about somehow we're on the back of a locust flying across Africa, and he then related a story from the Warner Brothers producers who, in a sneak peek of it, had been at the back of this packed studio, and 10 minutes into the film, he's talking about these producers. An audience member stood up and said, "The people who, quote, made this piece of shit are here," and they chased him out of the building. So these are the stories that are being told about this film back when it first came out. But a lot of people on Twitter seem to have some appreciation for this film. A lot of people said that it gets a lot more hate than it deserves. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but a lot of people on Twitter came to defend this film, I have to say.
Wow. I could see, like, not to harp on Zardoz, I could see how people would do that for Zardoz, and you're like, no, watch it. It's actually sort of weird and awesome. But The Exorcist II, there's the call to prayer. I don't know if you can hear that.
Oh, yeah.
It's 5:00. But this one, I wouldn't recommend anyone really watch it. Sadly, I'm
the call to prayer is coming at a very good moment. Like, don't watch it. Don't watch it.
I'm in a little bedroom on the top of a building, so it's like I'm right near to a mosque. I think there's 3 around, so you can't miss it.
That's amazing.
Wait, okay. Is there a call to prayer in the first Exorcist movie?
In the first one?
Is there a moment where there's a call to prayer in the beginning? Maybe there isn't. I don't know why I'm thinking that there was.
I don't think so. Maybe when they're in Africa. No, because they're in Ethiopia and that's Christian.
No.
But
Anyway. Maybe I'm just making that up.
But I do want to write a short film about a jinn. I'm a spirit, so that's I'm working on that out here. Just a short experimental film. Yeah, not that has anything to do with Exorcist. Well, I guess the jinns are evil spirits. Exorcist 4.
There you go.
An international market.
Oh.
Do we want to wrap up and give this movie a rating out of 5?
Yes, let's put this one to bed, I think.
All right, Terry, how many bat-sized locusts out of 5 do you give Exorcist II, The Heretic?
Well, I went in with the most opened mind that I possibly could, because we were just briefly talking about this movie has a history of being universally panned, universally reviled, and then it's sort of like an uptick in the third movie because a lot of people seem to really like that one, but this movie in particular just is constantly shat upon. So I'm always interested in that because I've heard that there's some camp sensibilities to it. I heard that it's a little ridiculous. So I was excited to visit it for the first time, but man, outside of a couple really cool set pieces, I am more interested in how this got made than I am about the actual movie because it's really boring. I think is what surprised me the most is how so much of this movie is two people staring at a strobe light for extended periods of time. It didn't do it for me. If I'm being generous, I'm going to give it 2 bat-sized locusts out of 5 for myself. What about you, Mary Beth?
I'm gonna have to agree with the 2 bat-sized locusts, which is 1 or 2 too many bat-sized locusts for my taste. But yeah, the ending is really fascinating, and there was some nuggets of good ideas, but overall it was just way more boring than I've ever wanted in an Exorcist movie, and this might be one of the most disappointing sequels to a film I've ever seen. So that's really selling it very well. But I'm glad I watched it. Yeah. I now know about it, and now I'm going to watch the third one and be very excited to watch the third one. So, Elza, you have the final word.
Oh, wow.
How many bat-sized locusts do you give Exorcist II?
I would give it 1, but I would feel that because I'm the one who suggested this film, I would feel really lame that a film I suggested was so bad, and I'll give it 2.
No, I love it
because it did scare me. When I scared a 10-year-old girl so much that she wanted to see a psychologist. So I think there's 1 for getting it made because it was insane, and then 2 for scaring me to death for quite a while. But that's about it.
There you go. Have you seen any of the other? I'm sure you probably have seen the first one, but have you seen the third one?
Yeah, I saw the third one, and for some reason I thought it was the second one that I was watching, and I was like, wait a minute, where's that scene with the heart? And then when I watched this one, I was like, oh, this is the one where there's someone who goes through an insane asylum with a sheet, and it's really scary. And then I was like, wait a minute, no. This is a different. I know. So I thought I was watching the third one again, and I realized actually I had never completely watched the second one. So now I've completely watched all 3 Exorcist films. I'm very happy with myself.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Elza, for joining us to talk about this wild movie, Exorcist II, The Heretic. Do you have any social media presence online, and what do you have coming up you'd like to share? I'm just on Facebook. That's all my brain can handle, and I have a website with where I put my projects up to date, and I want to have my little experimental short films on there. And yeah, for stuff that I'm working on, I'm actually working on like I said, a vampire TV show with Patricia Gomez, and it's based on an idea we had again a million years ago, where
It's based on a disease called porphyria that makes people allergic to the sun so much that they can die. So, and that's true. So we started using that point of departure, and then we're building a whole world around a tribe of people who have this disease, but over the millennia they've come to think that they're different creatures, that they're vampires, although we never call them vampires. And the TV show starts with one vampire who's migrated away and who's now living in suburbia with his human wife who's about to have a child. So he's rejected his vampire clan, and then two of his vampire tribes people come knocking on the door because they're having and they're unable to reproduce, and they know that he knows how to do it. And so it's a little bit like a clash of cultures, and it's how different people who've come from vastly different cultures and people who've left these cultures, how this clash of cultures alters them, but also with vampire shenanigans such as, blood drinking and vampire romance. So I'm not sure how.
Cool.
Yeah, it's called amazing. It's called Sweet Blood.
Sweet Blood.
I wrote a French language because I speak and write French. I wrote a French language possession film.
Oh, cool.
Oh my God. I'm just like, keep going. Keep telling me things I like, because I love vampires and possession movies. I'm like, yep. Yes.
And it's not The Exorcist, but it's a French-Canadian ghost who possesses various people, so it should be fun.
So many cool things coming up for you. But so listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. What's your experience with Exorcist II, the Heretic? Do you think it is good with the passage of time? Do you think it's so good it's bad? Let us know. You can send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us directly on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Won't somebody please think of the children? Somebody please think of the children. Somebody please think of the children.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.